Okay, so the National Library of Israel in Jerusalem holds an ex libris label designed for Martin Buber by the artist Moshe Ephraim Lillian. The bookplate depicts a brick wall reminiscent of those of the biblical temple and built in the shape of a Star of David. The walls enclose a European garden city, whose architecture evokes a neoclassical style. The inscription reads, "The land is mine." This is obviously a Jewish island, if one can attribute Jewishness to an island. This ex libris was designed in 1901, the year that the Fifth Zionist Congress was held in Basel. In this well-acclaimed Congress, Lillian and Buber collaboratively organized an exhibition entitled Jewish Art, and Buber delivered a presentation before the assembly, corresponding with the exhibition, known today as the Address on Jewish Art. In the speech, Israeli art historiographers tell us, Buber argued for the return of the Jewish artists to Eretz Israel in order for Jewish art to grow. Igal Salmona, former chief Israeli art curator in the Israel Museum, indeed translated and quoted Buber from the speech as followed, and I'm quoting Salmona, citing Buber. The original was in Hebrew. "We are slaves to many lands, and our thoughts fly to many skies. In the depths of our soul, we have no sky, no land and no sky. National art in the full sense will only grow on Jewish soil." But where one might ask, is this Jewish soil? Eretz Israel, Salmona will answer, but is it? Is Eretz Israel the land Buber claims ownership also in the ex libris? These two references to land or soil made by Buber, the image and the word, appears at odds with each other. Given the characteristic of the ex libris, the fantastical Jewish star-shaped island emerging from the turbulent sea cannot be seen as referring to the territory of Israel or any known landmass on earth. Yet the historical speech as quoted by Israeli scholars seem to draw a direct connection between foreign lands, the absence of independent territory for the Jews, and the objectives on Zionism, suggesting a Jewish return to Eretz Israel will also develop Jewish art. Against this context, one might once again ponder which land Buber was claiming ownership in the ex libris. However, it's also worth questioning the literal interpretation of Jewish soil in Israeli art historiography, hinting that the term might encompass more than just geographical territory. In this presentation, I aim to provide an alternative interpretation of Martin Buber's Address on Jewish Art, one that counters the dominant narrative within Israeli art historiography. Indeed, Israeli art history often frames its foundational paradigm around the idea of a national Israeli art style, arguing that it emerged solely from the territory of the State of Israel. This Eretz Israeli art has seemingly no diasporic influences, and its evaluation leans heavily on Martin Buber's remarks at a Congress about the origins of Jewish art on Jewish soil. I will argue that such an interpretation takes Buber's words out of their intended context. So, following a very brief discussion on translation and historical reception, the presentation will be divided into two. First, I will explore the founding paradigm of the imagined history of Israeli art, specifically examining how Buber's speech was interpreted more than half a century post its original delivery. This delayed reception imputed a specific connotation to Buber's notion of Jewish soil, aligning it predominantly with Palestine. Consequently, his Congress address became foundational reference for Israeli art historical narratives. Within this framework, Israeli art is perceived as having blossomed ex nihilo, yesh me'ayin, manifesting exclusively as modern Jewish art within Eretz Israel. Furthermore, while the diaspora witnessed creation by Jewish artists, such works were either categorized as lacking modernity or devoid of distinct Jewish essence. This prevailing paradigm posits the territory of Palestine as the sole conceivable Jewish soil to which Buber might have claimed ownership in his quest for national art. Second part of the presentation, I will reread the address on Jewish art, arguing for its metaphorical context. I will juxtapose its land-related poetics with that of two earlier texts from different publications. Crucially, this analysis will reveal Buber's profound engagement and distinct definition for Jewish art. By delving into its nationalistic perspective, which was embedded in cultural revival rather than territorial claims, and accompanied by his unique metaphorical writing formulation, I will argue that Jewish soil might extend beyond a mere geographical reference to the land of Israel, potentially encompassing the broader concept of Jewish community. So Buber delivered his speech on Jewish art in the German language in 1901. The English translation was made by Gilia Schmidt only in 1999. But references to the speech started to appear in Hebrew by scholars such as Gabriel Talpir in 1962 and Igal Salmona in 1980, 60 to 80 years after the delivery. However, to this very day, there is no full translation of the speech to Hebrew. This is all quite surprising considering the foundational role this speech has in Israeli art historiography, as I will show later. Is in the speech, and as we saw in the Ex Libris, Buber employed the German words land, but also used other words in German. These terms were not constantly translated with academic rigor into either English or Hebrew when integrated into art historical context since the 1960s. While they might generally correspond to the English terms earth, ground, and soil, or the Hebrew equivalents of Adama, Karka, and Eretz, each possessed nuanced differences often overlooked by the different translators. Furthermore, on the occasion when Buber's words were cited in Hebrew, differences between earlier and late translations emerged. While early translations of really just parts of the whole speech, while early translation referred to Jewish culture in Palestine and the diaspora with Buber's notion of Jewish soil, later translation focused solely on the land of Israel as Buber's Jewish land. I'm not getting into the specific examples, but in my article, I show how Buber's quotes were mishmashed and selectively picked up and brought together again, alternating their meaning, in short, taken out of context. What is important here in this shifting interpretation of Buber's notion of Jewish land is that it reveals that the central issue isn't one of pure linguistic accuracy, but more about the evolving dynamics of reception. While the Hebrew text referencing Buber in Israeli art history might not have been translated with strict academic rigor, the heart of the matter lies not in pinpointing the most precise terms for soil, earth, or land as counterparts to the German words, given their overlapping meaning in both languages. Instead, the focus is on the layered interpretations these terms acquired 6 to 8 decades later, and the implication they bore for their authors and readers. Israeli art historians of the 1980s, drawing from Buber's word, crafted a well-constructed founding narrative for Israeli art history. This narrative, rooted in a Zionist perspective, naturally tied the concept of Jewish soil to the tangible land of Israel, and the negation of the diaspora. This changed the dominant narrative from Jewish art that grew from Jewish cultural experience to Israeli art growing from the territory of Eretz Israel. Now, the images here try to convey this visually. Those are all paintings that were chosen for the Declaration of Independence in 1948 in the Tel Aviv Museum. This is how Israeli art represents itself when Jewish soil is understood also as Jewish culture and community. This is how Israeli art represents itself when Jewish soil is only the land of Israel. So putting matters of translation aside, I will focus our attention now to the role of Buber's speech in Israeli art history, or more precisely, his imagined role. Buber's address at the Fifth Zionist Congress, while now seemingly historically significant, remained largely undiscussed in written form until decades later, when it eventually resurfaced in the 1960s in scholarly accounts. It very naturally assumed a pivotal role in local art historiography. In a sense, this is an imagined history, meaning Buber's speech was not one that remained in collective memory and the resonance of it developed organically. Indeed, several factors contributed to the way the speech was naturally placed in Israeli art history 60 and 80 years after its delivery. First, the Fifth Zionist Congress by the 1960s had become a recognized milestone in Israeli cultural discourses and collective memory. The Congress, I stress, not the specific speech. This is because the Congress represented the core debate between culture and political Zionism, just before the Uganda debate took center stage. Echad Ha'am and Herzl represented in this Congress the two different visions of Zionism, the former viewing the land of Israel as a spiritual center, and the latter as a nation state. While political Zionism legacy gained prominence post the establishment of the Jewish state in 1948, cultural Zionism naturally emerged as the reference point in discussions on Israeli culture, especially when considering modern art production. Secondly, the Congress Jewish Art Exhibition stands out as the first instance of visual art showcased within Zionist framework. Organized by Buber and Lillian, which often heralded by Israeli historiographers as the first Zionist artist, this exhibition added art historical significance, given Lillian's also brief teaching in Bezalel, very brief, I might say, half a year. So, lastly, the very content of Buber's speech is his ideas on Jewish art and how it fits with Zionism, along with his fame as a philosopher, retroactively made his speech a key part of Israeli art history. And since the 1980s, it is frequently cited and referenced when talking about the beginning of Israeli art. Indeed, the first mention of Buber's within, by now canonic Israeli art history, can be found in the Story of Art in Israel, Sipora של אומנות ישראל, edited by Binyamin Tammuz and published in 1980. In the opening chapter, Gideon Ofrat characterizes Buber's artistic doctrine as the internalization of Zionism. Ofrat further explains Buber as a philosopher which believed that, and I quote, Ofrat quoting Buber, Jewish art in the land of Israel will express more than anything our essence as Zionists. In the land of Israel, our suppressed longing for beauty and nature can flourish and express itself in works of art. He cited 1906, the year the Bezalel School was established, as the founding year zero of Israeli art. This demarcation effectively placed post-1906 creation as Israeli art, suggesting that earlier works, even if Jewish, could not claim a place in Israeli art narrative. In this viewpoint, Israeli art as modern Jewish art emerged exclusively from the soil of Israel. The connection between Buber's address and the Ex Nihilo Yesh Me'ayin, birth of Israeli art, became even more apparent in Yigal Talmona's 1983 article, Shatz Betzalel. In this article, Talmona recounts the dialogue between Max Nordau and Buber during the Congress as an historical debate, Nordau viewing art as propaganda, while Buber viewing art as one of Zionist's main goals. However, Talmona, as we already saw in the beginning of this talk, quoted Buber with no accurate context and dismissing the cultural aspect of earlier translations. Talmona, much like Ofrat, identified a crucial relationship between the evolution of Jewish art on Jewish soil and political Zionism, suggesting that modern Jewish art will blossom only in a Jewish nation state. By the time 3 more decades have passed and come into the 2013 book, A Century of Israeli Art, Talmona no longer leans on Buber's exact words to argue on the philosopher's intention, asserting that Buber claims, and I quote Talmona, once free in their own sovereign territory, they, the diaspora Jews, will become whole and therefore be able to create great art. No quotation given from the speech whatsoever. Indeed, art historians revisiting Buber's speech against a backdrop of 30 and 60 years old state of Israel actually echoed a deeply rooted political and territorial Zionist narrative, that which claimed Jewishness only to Eretz Israel, that allowing modern Jewish art to grow only there. Yet while early scholars of the 1960s offered a nuanced interpretation, as shortly noted before, the canonic appropriation of the speech seems again less about Buber's original intent and more about aligning his words with prevailing Zionist ideologies. This established an imagined history of Israeli art. In this story, Buber's Jewish land refers to the territory of Palestine alone. A comprehensive analysis of Buber's address at the Congress, supplemented by relevant text, provides an alternative perspective on Buber's reference to Jewish soil in the domain of Jewish and Israeli art just presented. This nuanced exploration will be the focus of the upcoming presentation section. So the figurative literary style Buber used in the Congress in December 1901 was not new for him. Throughout that year, Buber had constantly invoked poetic allusions to national lands, skies, and suns. Furthermore, as an art history student, and this is an important aspect of his early life that is less known and quite crucial here, it is not surprising that he dedicated much of his time to writing on Jewish art and artists, with a particular focus on Uri Lesser. When these references to land are extracted from the specific context of the Zionist Congress, they do not seem to singularly privilege Eretz Israel in the discourse about the potentialities of Jewish art. In fact, Buber employs land in a metaphorical manner, giving upon it an array of interpretations that range from tangible earth to the broader aspect of human community. 2 key examples of earlier essays by Buber, Jewish Renaissance and Uri Lesser, will be showcased to elucidate this point. In Jewish Renaissance, published in January 1901, a full year before the Congress, Buber employed land-related terminology when arguing about the cultural rebirth in the Jewish communities of his era. He initiated his discourse on what he coined the Jewish Renaissance, by noting that the current historical epoch was marked by a global cultural reawakening. Buber envisioned this revival as a segment of a more extensive human revival, where, and I'm using Buber's own words, nationalistic groups assemble around new flags, changing their effort from territorial possessions and expansions to an attempt on a national culture. Within his hopeful depiction of humanity's future, Buber believed that the real value of nationalism is in expressing culture, not in taking over land. Now, transitioning from the broad cultural landscape to the specific case of Jewish society, Buber argued for the distinctive role of Jews in the world's cultural progression during this period. He proposed that Jews, while an undeniable part of this grand evolution, occupied a unique niche because of their singular historical and cultural condition. Their overall mission was tikkun olam, bettering the world. As a result, they have spread out and will be continued to be widespread, allowing their impact to extend everywhere. In Buber's perspective, the cultural blossoming of the Jews wasn't merely a nostalgic nod to bygone traditions, but symbolized a rebirth of the Jew to his ancient role, but in a modern cloak. Interestingly, the conventional yearning for tangible land is metaphorically swapped in Buber's narrative. He still desires land, but envisioned a different kind of terrain. He underscored his symbolic intent by highlighting this era as, and I'm quoting, marked by the symbol of new land. No, not return, but also not progress in the very boring conventional sense of the word. Everywhere sleeping worlds emerge like green islands from the depths of the sea, a rebirth of humanity, a rule of new lands. This clear description reminds us of the booklet for the beginning of the talk, when it is side by side with Buber's utopian perception of human society. Buber's own word assists in identifying the Jewish-shaped territory depicted on the ex libris. This island does not represent Jewish Palestine. It symbolizes a Jewish cultural community rather than solely a geopolitical entity. 1 month after writing Jewish Renaissance, Buber turned attention to the Jewish artist Uri Lesser, celebrating him as a living embodiment of, and I quote Buber again, the inner possibility of Jewish art. It was in this essay about Uri that Buber introduced the significant land-based metaphor that would later become noteworthy in Israeli art historical narrative. And I quote from this essay. National art needs soil from which to develop and a heaven towards which to flow. He writes as an introduction to his evaluation of the artist's work. This statement is further clarified by Buber in the immediate context of his writing on Uri. He elaborates on the metaphor by stating, national art needs a unified human community from which to stem and from which to exist. This sheds light yet again on Buber's metaphorical conceptualization of the new land of the Jews, a domain defined by a cohesive community anchored deeply in culture rather than by a mere geographical boundaries. Through Buber's lens, the reception of Uri's art becomes particularly noteworthy to our new reading. He stands out as a Jewish artist representative of these symbolic new lands of Buber. While Salmona and Ofrat interpretation of Buber would suggest such a representative artist to practice within the confines of Eretz Israel, Uri never arrived at Palestine. Now, given these two examples, it is not surprising that Buber used land-related poetics also in his speech at the Fifth Zionist Congress. Buber's address in the Congress focused on the Jewish culture reawakening in and through the arts. He attributed this not to the territorial pursuit of Zionism, but to Judaism entering into Western civilization post the Jewish emancipation in Europe. Contrary to many Zionists who viewed emancipation as an illusion, Buber believed it paved the way for Jewish nationalism and a revival of the creative spirit. He argued that Jewish arts Modern possibilities lay not in returning to the homeland, but in the Jews' initial emancipatory revival. Buber cleared away the conventional notion linking the second commandment to a lack in Jewish creativity, instead pointing to the prolonged Jewish oppression. Emancipation enabled Jews to attain modern education and influence European culture. Although this freedom was not absolute, Buber explained it provides a fertile ground for rejuvenated Jewish creativity. Now, after laying the groundwork with themes of cultural renaissance in the introduction of his address, Buber transitions into the body of the speech with a rich metaphorical reference to land. Drawing parallels between the Jewish people's condition and their historical homeland, he asserts, "For thousands of years we were barren people. We shared the fate of our land. A fine, horrible sand blew and blew over us until our saucers were buried and our soil was covered with a heavy layer that killed all buds." This desert, with its endless sands, represents Buber's metaphor for the cultural bareness that suppressed Jewish creativity. By juxtaposing the fate of our land with the people's cultural stagnation, Buber intensified the layered meaning of the Jewish land. His description suggests a renewal, where getting rid of these heavy layers allowed the ground to be productive again and bloom with lively cultural activity. In his word, he underscores the dual symbolism of the land, at times Eretz Israel, but also Jewish cultural community. Later in his address, Buber stresses that emancipation marked merely the beginning. True Jewish art for Buber goes beyond that. It should naturally come from what makes something Jewish. To achieve this, artists must immerse themselves in the rich tapestry of Jewish culture, drawing from, and I quote, language, customs, naive folk art of songs and nigunim, of menorot and talitim, end quote. Having elucidated the significance of Jewish art as pivotal to Jewish nationalism, Buber extolled the benefits as a supreme educational tool. He championed the language of art, believed it to transcend textual language in revealing a person's like a whole and complete Jewish culture as such. But what we have already today are cultural buds, artistic seeds, and we must nurture them here in the diaspora with a tender, loving hand until we can plant them into the soil of our homeland. This articulation of soil by Buber once again highlights his multifaceted interpretation. At moments, it signified a physical homeland, yet in other instances, it metaphorically points to a newly emancipated Jewish community with a diasporic fate, tilling the fertile grounds of culture. The rest of the speech was dedicated to present three Jewish arts: music, visual art, and literature. He delved into each art form, examining their past accomplishment and their present state, emphasizing their potential for the future. Among the three arts, he considered Jewish music to be the most mature. It wasn't merely about notes or melodies. For Buber, it was about embodiment of Jewishness. He believed that a Jewish affinity for music was inherent. This idea became even more pronounced as he touched upon the Hasidic period and the klezmer tradition, viewing them as examples of pure Jewish artistic creation. He argued that the European music scene became richer with Jewish contributions as soon as emancipation allowed their participation. To bolster the growth of Jewish music, Buber underscored the need to collect all existing musical materials, emphasizing especially the importance of Yiddish folk songs and Hebrew poetry. Buber's perspective on visual art was more critical. He perceived it as Judaism's weaker artistic link, having, and I quote, developed only like a seed, like a hint to our people, end quote. Historically, he explained in his role as an art historian, Jewish visual art thrived through the adornment of ritual objects in synagogues. The global acknowledgement of these objects' artistic merit led to their systematic collection and categorization. Buber was optimistic that deeper studies would reveal the profound beauty of these collections. Yet he also acknowledged a shift. While Jewish art had traditionally been tied to religious life, he noted its growth beyond religious confines, citing the emergence of Jewish artists who, and I quote, did not only express the soul of our tribe in their creation externally, in materials and themes, the Jewish character was also deeply embedded in the perception and form of these works. In the speech, Buber highlights several artists, including Yosef Israelis, Maurizio Gottlieb, Max Lieberman, and Linian, his co-producer of the show, praising their ability to express their Jewish identity through their art. Buber expressed admiration for Lester Uri, a standout in his review, as already mentioned in his earlier text from 1901. Referring to one of Uri's notable works, Buber remarked, "In Jerusalem, he painted the entire Jewish people in a small group of wandering Jews who rest on a bench by the ocean, capturing the entire history of our people in one evening when heaven and ocean confront each other in yearning." Buber celebrated Uri's ability to encapsulate profound Jewish sentiments in art through metaphorical expressions. In this context, the concrete location of Jerusalem is absent from the painting. Instead, the city's name symbolizes the entire Jewish people. Indeed, concepts such as Jerusalem, land, heaven, and ocean all carry dynamic meaning and metaphorical significance in Buber's text. As Buber concluded the exploration of the visual arts, his vision became evident. He aimed to establish a foundation for a flourishing Jewish artistic community in the Jewish diaspora. To realize this ambition, he proposed initiatives like art exhibitions and the foundation of a dedicated Jewish publishing house. Literature, the last art form mentioned in Buber's speech, was a beacon of Jewish artistic expression. Encompass works written across various languages under the umbrella of Jewish literature, clearing any hierarchy between them. The only criteria for Buber, they had to resonate with national Jewish consciousness and appeal to both Jewish and global audience. Buber's admiration for Jewish literature was evident when he stated, "Nothing has brought to my attention an overwhelming as Jewish literature that the new land has been born, that we have received new strengths and new voice." This quote subtly reinforced my metaphorical reading of Buber's Jewish land, thereby challenging yet again the conventional Israeli historic association between Jewish soil and the land of Israel. And as he concluded his address, Buber underscored the intertwined role of art in Zionism and Zionism in art. He emphasized that the future of Jewish culture would hinge upon a creative community conscious of its unique identity, viewing it as a conduct to national redemption. He passionately concludes his address. "We envision that there will be Jewish art in Jewish homes, Jewish music, Jewish paintings, Jewish readings, which is at the same time good and genuine art. Foreign art shall be relegated to second place." In a complete garden, one desires to enjoy and to rest. But when we see uncultivated soil, we wish to create new, strange, never before seen gardens. May that be large or small. Where there is well-being, there is your homeland, is an old lie. Not the land that we enjoy the most is the best, but that where we are the most productive. May Jewish art be such a new, strange, never before seen garden. In these words from his speech, Buber crystallized the essence of Jewish art as growing on a new old land that fosters the creative spirit of Jewishness. A year later found him penning an essay named A Spiritual Center, advocating for a spiritual epicenter within the diaspora as an essential precursor to the eventual migration to Palestine. In that article, he articulated his reservation about the trajectory of the Zionist movement. He emphasizes, "I do not believe that we shall consider loading people onto ships like dead freight, send them across the land, and then expect the soil to perform a miracle." For Buber, authentic Jewish art isn't solely a product of Eretz Israel. Instead, it grows from a cohesive Jewish community, one initially nurtured in the diaspora. While in 1901, Buber conceptualized Zionism primarily as a cultural movement, his pronouncement at the Congress unwittingly paved the way for the future art historiographies that imagined a territorial fixation on Eretz Israel. By 1980, Buber's metaphorical depiction of an untouched land of Israel was anchored to a specific Zionist ethos, that Jewish land could only mean Palestine, the exclusive cradle for the evolution of modern Jewish art. However, my examination challenged such art historical imaginations. Through my analysis, I've underscored that for Buber, the Jewish soil symbolizes also a vibrant Jewish cultural community and its potential for creativity. In this narrative, I've highlighted how Israeli art history appropriates Buber's discourse, portraying it as foundational narrative for an art form reborn only with the Jewish return to Palestine. This appropriation overlooked the very exhibition curated by Buber and Lillian. Misreading Buber's nuanced usage of land symbolism, many Israeli art scholars placed Eretz Israel as the epicenter for modern Jewish artistic endeavors. My exploration, however, unraveled this territorial reading, revealing alternative interpretations. Revisiting Buber's speech illuminates the necessity to rethink our understanding of Jewish Israeli art history, to reimagine it. A prevalent outcome of the canonic narrative is the pre-assumption that modern art conceived outside the land of Israel, or possibly crafted by Jews, does not qualify as a modern Jewish art. As a result, it doesn't factor into the desired lineage of Jewish Israeli art. This narrow view has constrained local art historiography, placing its discourse within the confines of political Zionism and Western art theories. Disentangling Jewish Israeli art history from its myopic association with Eretz Israel paves the way for a more expansive exploration into its diverse roots and creative lands, delving into domains like religious Jewish art, Eastern and Islamic art, and the decorative arts, a research I'm presently immersed in. Thank you. I'll stop the screen. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Noah. What a rich paper you gave us.